The hum of the USS Vigilance filled the bridge, a constant pulse as the ship glided through the cold expanse of space. Captain Jackson Stryker stood at the helm, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the stars ahead. His brow furrowed, not just from the ship's course, but from the weight of the impending conflict. The Verdrath system loomed ahead, a crucial battleground where humanity's future and the survival of countless colonies would be decided. "Captain," reports coming in from the fleet. Lieutenant Vasquez's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood by the comm station, her gaze intense as she studied the incoming data. The Yithians are positioning their ships. It's only a matter of time before they strike. Jackson nodded, his jaw tight. "Prepare for engagement. Inform the fleet to hold their positions. We need to send a message before they think they can just take this system." Humanity had been in orbit above Verdrath for weeks, pushing for peaceful negotiations, but the Yithians, a species known for their cold arrogance, had made it clear they saw no value in diplomacy with what they considered a lesser race. They didn't want humanity as an ally. They wanted humanity to kneel. "Understood," Vasquez said, turning back to her console. "Targeting systems are online, just waiting for the green light." The Vigilance was one of the most advanced ships in the fleet, equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and defenses, but even that didn't bring Jackson comfort. The Yithians had their own weaponry, unknown and dangerous, and they'd never fought humanity in this kind of war before. There was a sense of unpredictability that gnawed at him. Jackson's mind drifted back to the briefing earlier that day. The Yithians were no strangers to war. Their empire spanned centuries, their technology unmatched in many ways. Their fleets were larger, their ships faster, their weapons more advanced. But humanity had something they didn't: determination, will, the drive to win at all costs. "Sir," came a voice from across the room. Dr. Lila Harns, the ship's medical officer, approached with a soft but serious expression. "You need to reconsider the course of action. The Yithians will not stop with just an attack. This is just the beginning. If we engage them fully, we risk everything." Jackson turned to face her, his features hardening. He'd known Lila for years. She had been his anchor when the world felt like it was tearing apart, but now wasn't the time for doubts. "And what exactly do you suggest we do, Lila?" "Sit back and let them take everything." She didn't flinch. "I'm saying there's more at stake here than just our pride. If we go to war, we risk our survival. We've already seen the scale of their power. We're not ready for a full confrontation." Jackson exhaled sharply, feeling the familiar weight of his duty settle on his shoulders. "We didn't come this far just to be pushed around. They think we're weak because we try to talk first. But you can only talk to an enemy who listens." His voice dropped lower, hardening. "They're not listening." The room grew tense. Everyone on the bridge had their own thoughts on what should be done, but Jackson was the one who had to make the call. He had always believed that war was the last resort, but the Yithians had forced his hand. He had no illusions about what this would cost. "Captain," Vasquez called from the tactical station. "Incoming message from the Yithian envoy. They're demanding we leave immediately or face consequences. They claim that humanity's time in the galaxy is over." Jackson's fingers tightened into a fist, his voice cold as he spoke. "Reply. Tell them we won't leave. And remind them who they're dealing with." As Vasquez relayed the message, Jackson's eyes drifted to the viewports, watching the distant planet of Verdrath. It was a mineral-rich world, vital for the Yithian Empire's expansion, and they weren't going to relinquish it without a fight. But humanity wasn't going to back down either. They had made their mark in the galaxy, and they would defend it. "Captain," Dr. Harn spoke again, her tone softening, "I know you believe this is our only option, but there's always another way. We don't have to become the monsters they think we are." Jackson's gaze never left the planet. "Sometimes you have to become the monster to stop one from destroying everything you love." His voice was unwavering, but the words tasted bitter as they left his mouth. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew it was true. A silence settled over the bridge, the weight of the situation pressing on everyone's shoulders. The crew had trained for this moment their entire lives, but now that it was here, nothing seemed simple. The harsh reality of war was always more complicated than the plans laid out in classrooms or simulations. "Sir, the fleet is ready for your orders," Vasquez reported, her eyes sharp, waiting for his command. Jackson glanced at her, his mind focused, heart steel for the inevitable. "Execute the plan. We show them that we're not just peacekeepers, we're warriors. And warriors don't back down." The order rang out, and the crew sprang into action. The Vigilance shifted into position, its weapons targeting systems locking onto the Yithian ships in orbit. The tension in the room was palpable, each crew member preparing for the worst. Jackson stood firm, his mind already shifting into the mindset of a leader at war, knowing that the next few hours would define everything humanity stood for. Outside, the stars continued to shine, oblivious to the battle brewing. But for Jackson and his crew, the galaxy would never be the same again. As the ship lurched forward, the first volley of fire erupted from the Yithian fleet. The war had begun, and humanity would make its stand. The Vigilance shuddered as the first wave of Yithian fire slammed into its shields. The high-pitched whine of the impact reverberated through the hull, followed by the rapid clattering of the damage control systems as they sprang to life. On the bridge, Captain Jackson Stryker remained calm, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The enemy ships loomed large on the screen, sleek, alien, and far more powerful than any human ship had ever been. Shields holding at 85%, Vasquez reported from the tactical station. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced speed, adjusting the ship's defense matrix. "We could take a few more hits like that, but not many." "Status on weapons?" Jackson asked, his voice steady despite the rising pressure. He had fought in countless battles before, but this felt different. This was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. "Ready to fire, Captain," Lieutenant Vasquez answered. "Weapons are online and locked on targets." Jackson nodded, his gaze moving to the view screen where the enemy ships hovered in space, their weapons systems charging. The Yithians had launched their offensive with precision. No wasted shots, no second chances. They were here to win, and they had underestimated the will of the human race. "Open fire," Jackson ordered. A series of heavy explosions erupted as the Vigilance's guns discharged, sending torrents of laser fire toward the nearest Yithian warships. The weapons systems lit up the dark expanse of space, creating streaks of deadly light. The Yithian ships returned fire immediately, their weapons cutting through the distance with terrifying speed. The bridge was alive with activity as the crew reacted to the chaos unfolding outside. On the screen, a Yithian destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash, its shields collapsing under the sustained fire. For a moment, the crew dared to believe they had the upper hand, but it was fleeting. "Captain," Vasquez shouted. "They're reinforcing. More ships incoming from the outer rim." Jackson's eyes narrowed. The Yithians weren't making the same mistake twice. They were consolidating their forces. The battle was escalating. "We need to break their formation," Jackson said, his mind racing. "Reposition the fleet. Target their flanks. Let's see if we can force them into a retreat." Vasquez immediately relayed the command. "All ships, break formation. Move to intercept the enemy's left and right flanks. Focus fire." On the view screen, the human fleet moved in perfect coordination, shifting into a staggered formation that took advantage of the Yithians' weaknesses. The Vigilance led the charge, its massive guns cutting a swath through the Yithian lines. The battle had become a dance of tactics, each side trying to outsmart the other, each ship a piece in a larger game of survival. "Direct hit on the lead Yithian cruiser," Vasquez called out, her voice laced with a rare hint of excitement. "Shields are down. They're venting atmosphere." Jackson allowed himself a brief nod of approval, but his focus never wavered. "Stay sharp. This isn't over yet." A sudden explosion rattled the ship, throwing everyone off balance. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the damage control systems kicked into overdrive. "Captain, they've breached the starboard side," Vasquez shouted. "Hull integrity compromised. We've lost 2 decks." Jackson's eyes shot to the damage reports flashing across his screen. The Vigilance was still functional, But the breach was a serious blow. They were taking casualties, and the Yithians hadn't even deployed their full strength yet. "We've got incoming fire from all directions," Vasquez added, her voice tight with urgency. "We need reinforcements or we'll be outmatched." Jackson's mind raced. The Yithians were relentless, and they were showing no signs of slowing down. He needed to act quickly, or this would be humanity's last stand. "All ships, fall back to a defensive position," Jackson commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who knew the stakes. "Get us out of here now." The Vigilance began its retreat, its engines roaring to life as it pulled away from the fray. The human fleet followed suit, slowly pulling back toward the edge of the Verdrath system. The Yithians, sensing weakness, pushed forward with renewed aggression. "Captain," Vasquez said, her voice laced with concern, "we've taken heavy losses. Half of our fleet is already disabled or retreating." Jackson's jaw tightened. This wasn't how he'd planned it. The fight was supposed to be a clear victory, a demonstration of humanity's strength. But now, they were on the back foot, struggling to keep up with the overwhelming might of the Yithian forces. He turned to Dr. Lila Harns, who had remained silent during the chaos. Her expression was grim, eyes wide with the weight of the situation. "We can't keep running," she said, her voice steady but tinged with a sense of urgency. "We need to turn this around, or it's over for all of us." Jackson glanced at her, his thoughts momentarily drifting to the fleet that was still retreating. "We've still got a few tricks left," he said, more to reassure himself than anyone else. "Are we really going to leave it at this?" Lila asked. Her eyes never left the view screen. "Humanity's future is on the line. If we retreat now, the Yithians will see us as weak. They'll come for every colony we've built." He didn't have an answer for that, but he knew what had to be done. "Hold course," Jackson ordered, his tone now resolute. "We'll make our stand here. The Yithians have made their move. Now it's our turn." A tense silence settled over the bridge as the crew prepared for the next phase of the battle. The Vigilance was battered but not broken. Humanity's fight was far from over, and Jackson was determined to make the Yithians regret ever underestimating the power of the human spirit. "Prepare to re-engage," Jackson commanded, his gaze steely. "We're not running anymore. It's time to show them who we really are." The battle for Verdrath wasn't over, and Jackson Stryker would make sure that humanity would be remembered as more than just a footnote in the history of the galaxy. They were here to stay, and they would fight with everything they had. The war was just beginning, and the outcome was uncertain. But Jackson knew one thing. He would never give up, no matter what. Humanity's survival was on the line, and he would do whatever it took to ensure that they came out victorious. The Vigilance rocked as a Yithian warship's main cannon tore through its shields again. The bridge was filled with the shriek of alarms and the hiss of overworked systems struggling to keep the ship intact. Jackson gripped the edge of his command chair, his knuckles white as the damage reports flooded in. The human fleet, though outnumbered, had made its stand at the edge of the Verdrath system, and now they were facing the full wrath of the Yithians. "Captain, we've lost another frigate," Vasquez reported, her voice clipped. "The outer defense perimeter is collapsing. We won't last much longer unless we get reinforcements." Jackson's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the battle on the tactical display. The Yithians were pressing hard, their ships swarming like locusts, relentless and calculating. They didn't care about losses. Their only goal was victory. And with every human ship destroyed, the weight of the enemy's superiority seemed to crush the morale of the fleet. "Hold steady," Jackson ordered, his voice low but firm. "Don't let them see us falter." He turned to Dr. Lila Harns, standing at her station in the corner of the bridge, her face pale but determined. "Lila, what's our status on the experimental weapon? We need something to turn the tide." Lila met his gaze, her hands moving rapidly across the console as she initiated the final sequence for the weapon. "It's ready, Captain. The quantum disruptor is primed and locked on target. But if we use it, we'll have to make a direct hit. The margin for error is virtually non-existent." Jackson looked back at the tactical display, where the largest Yithian battleship loomed ominously. It was the heart of the enemy fleet, the one ship that coordinated the rest. If they could bring it down, the others might scatter, losing their organization and cohesion. But the path was clear: a direct strike, one shot, or they were done for. "Do it," Jackson said, his voice hard as steel. "We're not going to retreat again. This is the moment." Lila hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "I'll initiate the sequence now." The hum of the ship's engines faded to a low, steady thrum as the Vigilance's weapons systems powered up. The quantum disruptor, a last-ditch weapon developed in secret by humanity's best scientists, began to charge. It was a gamble, a massive energy weapon that could destabilize a ship's core with a single shot, but at the cost of burning out the Vigilance's own power grid. Jackson felt the weight of the decision in his gut. If they failed, the Vigilance would be a dead hulk in space, and humanity's last hope would be extinguished. If they succeeded, it would send a message to the Yithians. Humanity wasn't to be underestimated. "Captain, the Yithian battleship is locking onto us," Vasquez reported. "They're charging their main weapon. We have seconds before." Before she could finish, the Vigilance lurched violently. The ship's shields flared white-hot as the Yithian beam made contact, but the energy was diverted, held at bay by the ship's remaining defenses. The bridge shook again, and sparks flew from several consoles. Jackson fought to keep his balance. "Now!" Lila shouted. "Fire!" Jackson commanded, his voice full of cold certainty. The Vigilance's forward cannon discharged in a brilliant flash, and the quantum disruptor shot forward like a spear of pure energy. It collided with the Yithian battleship's hull in an explosion of blinding light. The shockwave of the blast sent tremors through the ship, and for a moment, Jackson feared the worst. But then the tactical display blinked. The Yithian battleship began to flicker, its systems destabilizing. "Direct hit," Vasquez called out. "The Yithian battleship is going critical. It's going to explode." Jackson exhaled, the tension that had gripped him releasing in a single breath. The sight of the Yithian flagship crumbling on the screen, its massive hull disintegrating in a chain reaction of explosions, was both exhilarating and terrifying. The force of the blast was immense, sending shockwaves through the entire battlefield. "All ships fall back," Jackson ordered. "Focus on any remaining targets. Take out the stragglers." The human fleet, though battered and broken, rallied behind their flagship. The Yithians, now leaderless and disoriented, scattered in all directions. The remaining human ships tore into the Yithian forces with renewed vigor, knowing that they had taken the first step toward victory. As the chaos of the battle subsided, Jackson stood, allowing himself a moment of relief. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a turning point. Humanity had taken a stand. Vasquez approached him, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "That was something, Captain." Jackson gave her a tight smile. "It was. But we're not out of this yet. We've wounded them, but they'll come back stronger. We need to plan our next move carefully." Dr. Harns joined them, her face showing signs of exhaustion. The disruptor did its job. The Yithians didn't expect that kind of power. But we've used up most of our reserves. We don't have another shot like that in us. Jackson nodded. "We'll have to make do with what we've got. We've just earned ourselves a little breathing room." Vasquez's voice was steady but filled with concern. "What if they regroup? They won't take this lightly." "They won't," Jackson agreed. "But we've shown them that we're not the easy target they thought we were. We'll need to reinforce our defenses, plan for the long haul, and keep pushing forward. The battle for Verdrath isn't over. It's only just begun." Lila's eyes were fixed on the view screen, where the remnants of the Yithian fleet were slowly drifting into the distance. "And the message we sent, it's clear. Humanity doesn't run. We fight back." Jackson looked at her, and for the first time since the battle began, a sense of hope flared in his chest. "Yes, we fight, and we're just getting started." The bridge fell into a momentary silence, but it was a silence that held promise, the calm before the next storm. The war was far from over, but humanity had made its mark. The Yithians had underestimated them, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. Jackson turned back to the tactical display, his fingers brushing the controls as he began to plan their next move. There was no time to waste. The future of humanity was still at stake, and it was a fight they weren't ready to lose. Not now. Not ever. The bridge of the Vigilance was eerily calm after the battle. The hum of the ship's engines and the faint chatter of officers working at their stations filled the air. Outside, the debris of the Yithian fleet drifted in silence, a grim reminder of the chaos that had just unfolded. Jackson stood at the front of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the stars beyond. "Captain, we've received a transmission from command," Vasquez said, her voice cutting through the quiet. "They're requesting an update on our status." Jackson turned to face her, his mind still processing the events. They had won the battle for now, but there was no illusion of safety. The Yithians were a persistent force, and humanity had just begun to show them what they were capable of. "Patch it through," Jackson said. The holographic communication terminal flickered to life, and the face of Admiral Collins appeared. His stern expression softened when he saw Jackson. "Captain Jackson, we were monitoring the battle. I'm impressed. The disruptor's effectiveness exceeded our expectations." Jackson nodded, though the weight of the responsibility still hung heavily on his shoulders. "We hit them hard, but it's far from over, Admiral. We've taken down their flagship, but they're not going to sit idly by. Expect retaliation soon." "Understood," Collins replied. "We're sending reinforcements to the Verdrath system. It's time we show the Yithians that this war isn't one they can win. But I need you to hold your position. We can't afford to lose that system." "Understood, Admiral," Jackson responded. "We'll hold the line." The transmission ended, and Jackson turned back to the viewports. "Vasquez, what's our current status on repairs and ship integrity?" Vasquez was already at her station, typing rapidly on her console. "We've suffered significant damage to our hull. The quantum disruptor drained nearly all of our energy reserves, but we've managed to stabilize the core. Shields are down to 30%, but we're functional. We can hold for now." Jackson gritted his teeth. They had barely survived the last encounter, and now they were expected to face another onslaught. The thought of having to fight the Yithians with limited resources gnawed at him. "We need to get more firepower," Jackson muttered to himself. "Can we initiate repairs on the other ships in the fleet?" Vasquez nodded. "We've already sent repair teams to the Horizon and Vanguard. The rest are still combat-ready, but they're all low on ammunition." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Even with reinforcements on the way, the fleet was stretched thin. Jackson knew they couldn't afford another direct confrontation without risking the fleet's total annihilation. "Do we have any other weapons at our disposal?" Jackson asked, his mind racing for alternatives. Dr. Lila Harns, who had been silently monitoring her station, spoke up. "There's the prototype drone fleet we've been developing, small, fast, and heavily armed. It could help us gain an upper hand in reconnaissance and potentially disrupt enemy formations." Jackson's brow furrowed. "And how soon can we deploy them?" Lila's fingers moved across her console. "The drones are ready, but they require a launch from the Vigilance's secondary hangar bay. We'll need to clear some space for launch." Jackson glanced over at Vasquez, who nodded, already starting to issue commands. "We'll make room. Prepare the drones for deployment, Dr. Harns. We're running out of time." As Lila turned back to her station, Jackson watched the stars stretch across the void. The Yithians were a relentless enemy, their superiority in numbers and technology threatening to crush humanity's spirit. But Jackson had learned something in the past few days. The Yithians underestimated the human will to fight, the raw determination that drove them to survive against all odds. It wasn't just technology that would win this war. It was something deeper, something more primal. "Captain," Vasquez said, pulling Jackson from his thoughts. "We've detected a Yithian ship entering the system. It's large, but its signature is faint. It could be a decoy or a scout ship." Jackson straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Bring it up." The tactical display flickered, and the shape of the Yithian vessel appeared on the screen. It was massive, but the lack of energy readings suggested it wasn't fully operational. It was a risk, a gamble. They could destroy it now and risk alerting the full Yithian fleet, or they could wait and try to understand its purpose. Vasquez, Send a squadron of interceptors to engage it. We need to know what we're dealing with. Don't destroy it unless we have no choice. Understood, Captain, Vasquez said, her voice firm. The small fleet of interceptors shot out from the Vigilance, their engines flaring brightly as they closed in on the mysterious Yithian ship. Jackson watched the screen closely, waiting for the first sign of what this ship was truly capable of. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Then, suddenly, the Yithian vessel lit up with activity. It wasn't firing, but its engines flared to life, and the ship began moving rapidly, trying to escape the interceptor's pursuit. Captain, they're running, Vasquez called out. We can't let them escape. Order the interceptors to disable its engines, Jackson ordered. We need it intact for analysis. The battle began to unfold on the screen as the interceptors moved in, their weapons trained on the Yithian ship's engines. A few tense moments later, the Yithian ship's engines sputtered and died, and it drifted powerless in space. We've got it, Vasquez said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. Bring it in, Jackson replied. Let's see what the Yithians are hiding. As the Yithian ship was pulled into the Vigilance's docking bay, Jackson felt a twinge of hope. They had taken a significant risk, but it might pay off. This ship, however damaged it was, could hold valuable information, something that could change the course of the war. He turned to Dr. Harns. Get a team ready. We need to crack open that ship and find out what it's carrying. We can't waste any time. Lila gave him a sharp nod, her face grim but determined. On it, Captain. As the ship was brought aboard, Jackson allowed himself a brief moment to reflect on the turning tide. They had survived the first wave. Now, with the Yithians on the retreat, the human spirit was beginning to shine through. They had proved their worth, and if they played their cards right, they might just have a fighting chance to win the war. But there was no time to dwell on victory. The next battle was already on the horizon, and it would take everything they had to win it. The air inside the Vigilance's research bay was thick with anticipation. Jackson paced in front of a Yithian ship, now secured in the docking bay. It was an imposing, skeletal vessel, its angular design a stark contrast to the sleek human ships they had grown accustomed to. Every inch of it seemed foreign, strange, and terrifying. The discovery of this ship had shifted the odds in humanity's favor, but Jackson knew that the real value lay in uncovering its secrets. Dr. Harns and her team were already hard at work, their tools humming and whirring as they carefully extracted data from the ship's systems. Jackson watched them, his mind preoccupied with the larger picture. This could be the turning point in the war. The Yithians had underestimated humanity's resolve and resourcefulness, and now they were about to find out just how far that could go. Captain, Dr. Harns called, her voice tight with excitement. She stood before a monitor, eyes wide with discovery. You need to see this. Jackson stepped up to the console, his heart pounding in his chest. The data on the screen was a jumble of alien symbols and encrypted files. But one thing was clear, it was a map of a system that was not far from Verdrath, a system that had been considered uninhabitable for centuries. Is this some kind of decoy? Jackson asked, his voice low, his brow furrowed. Dr. Harns shook her head. No, this map is showing us something we've never seen before. There's a base hidden in the uncharted moons of a distant planet. I think it's a staging ground. If the Yithians are planning an attack on Earth, that's where they'll launch it from. Jackson stood silent for a moment, his mind racing. They had suspected that the Yithians were preparing for a full-scale invasion. But this was something else. The Yithians had a hidden base in their territory, and it was located right in the path of humanity's expansion. We need to go there, Jackson said, his voice firm. This could be our chance to strike first. Dr. Harns nodded, but her expression was grim. It's going to be dangerous. The Yithians are likely aware of the map's existence, and they may have booby-trapped the area. We need to be prepared for anything. We don't have time to waste, Jackson replied, his voice hard with resolve. Send a message to the fleet. We're moving out. Hours later, the Vigilance and her fleet were hurtling toward the uncharted system. Jackson stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the star charts as they approached the location marked on the Yithian map. His crew moved quickly and efficiently. The quiet buzz of activity a sign that they were all on edge. Every one of them knew the stakes. A successful strike could cripple the Yithian forces, but failure would mean the end of humanity's chances. Approaching the system, Captain, Vasquez reported, her voice steady but tinged with tension. Initial scans show no signs of hostile ships, but we're picking up strange energy signatures. It's like the entire system is shielded. Jackson nodded, but his mind was already working through the possibilities. The Yithians had mastered cloaking technology in the past, so this wasn't unexpected. They had to assume that every step they took would be watched. Prepare the fleet for immediate action, Jackson ordered. We'll go in under the cover of darkness. Get us within firing range of the base without alerting them. The Vigilance engines hummed as they moved into position, cloaking shields engaged, blending with the surrounding space. The fleet was a tight formation, their weapons ready, though they were still on the defensive. Jackson wasn't about to risk a direct assault without first gathering more intelligence. As the ship drew closer to the base, Jackson could feel the tension rising. They were within striking distance now, but the unknown was still a dangerous variable. The Yithians could be waiting for them, ready to pounce at the first sign of weakness. Captain, Vasquez called, her voice tinged with urgency. We've got a ship moving in on our location. It's Yithian, and it's heading right for us. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped they could catch the enemy off guard, but it seemed the Yithians had anticipated this move. Raise shields, he ordered, his voice calm but commanding. Prepare for combat. The Yithian ship appeared on the scanners, its sleek silhouette cutting through the dark void of space. It was smaller than the previous flagship they had destroyed, but it was heavily armed. Activate the disruptors, Jackson ordered. We're not giving them a chance to escape. The Vigilance's weapons charged, energy crackling around the ship as the quantum disruptors powered up. As the Yithian ship approached, Jackson gave the order. Fire! The beam from the disruptor slammed into the Yithian ship's hull, sending it spiraling out of control. The impact lit up the dark space around them, a blinding flash of blue light that illuminated the entire system. The Yithian vessel wasn't destroyed, but it was disabled. Jackson knew it wouldn't be long before they sent reinforcements. The time for subtlety was over. All units, prepare for boarding, Jackson ordered. We're taking that base. The Vigilance's Marines stormed the base's outer defenses, their boots ringing on the cold metallic floors. Jackson was at the front, his mind focused on the task at hand. They had already secured the perimeter, but the real challenge lay within the depths of the base. Move out, Jackson barked to the team, his voice a sharp command. The Marines fanned out, their weapons ready, every sense on high alert. The Yithians had built this place for a reason, and that reason had yet to be fully revealed. They moved swiftly through the narrow hallways, their footsteps echoing off the cold walls. The base was disturbingly quiet, the only sounds coming from the hum of alien machinery. They encountered no resistance yet, but Jackson knew the Yithians were waiting for them. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the base seemed to come alive. The walls pulsed with an ominous red light, and Jackson's gut tightened. Ambush, he shouted. Get ready. The Yithians struck from every direction. The Marines fought back fiercely, but Jackson's focus remained on the mission, finding whatever it was the Yithians had been hiding. He needed to uncover their plans before the enemy overwhelmed them. As they made their way deeper into the base, Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. Whatever was waiting for them here, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's future depended on what they found next. The tide of the war was shifting, but it was up to him to ensure it stayed that way.